So let's get started. Doug did an excellent job last week, by the way. Now I'm nervous because I'm not going to do as good as last week.
The pressure's on. The pressure's on.
Seriously.
America's Next Top Podcast host.
All right. Chris says, is it safe to do a hot add of CPU and/or memory with SQL Server running in VMware?
So, if anything, I would be more comfortable with memory than I would with CPU, but I would look at this as an emergency fix. I wouldn't look to make this a regular part of my routine, especially with the weirdness that goes on with NUMA nodes and how SQL Server puts different cores in different Windows puts different cores in different NUMA nodes. So, generally speaking, this isn't something that I would do. I would rather take the outage, add the CPU and memory, and restart it.
All right. Rada asks, is there an efficient way to search varchar max fields?
Several, but it kind of depends on how you're searching them. So if you give me a little bit more information on what you're trying to do, I could get a better answer for you.
Is there a most common way? Is there a most common use? Or not really?
Yeah, there are a couple. You can either go full bore and just make a full text index on it. If you're searching for specific parts of it, you can make a computed column that sort of parses out the parts that you're searching. Or if you want to get really fancy, you can make a computed column that is a hash of the field and just search matching hashes.
Cool. Let's see. Tom says, why would I want to cluster MSDTC if I'm building a SQL Server failover cluster?
The why is an interesting one. So assume that you're going to have distributed transactions. If you're going to have distributed transactions, then you need to know who controls that. What happens when you lose one of the nodes in the cluster? What happens if you lose one of the instances in the cluster? Especially if you have, say, a 4-node cluster running 5 instances of SQL Server, who do you want controlling those transactions? Because it's got to be up and running if you're going to run transactions across multiple instances. The name that I would search for there is Cindy Gross. Cindy, Gross. She is a Microsoft employee who's written extensively about DTC on clusters, and she has a lot of great examples for both old Windows 2008 clusters as well as Win 2012 clusters as well.
Isn't it required regardless if you're going to be using MSDTC? So, I mean, why is, I mean, it's just required.
Yeah, it's how you want to configure it.
Yeah. Who wants to answer security questions?
Sure.
Why not?
Let's see. A question from Jeff. He says, do you usually disable or rename the SA account? If you disable, do you change the default database owner to SA or something else?
Rename and disable.
Dang, you're ambitious. So why'd you do it? What got you started on that?
We just went through this best practices exercise. I don't remember. We had a security breach, and so we just went through, not with SA, but with other things. It didn't hit the SQL servers, but it was a company issue. So we just decided to go through and do best practices.
Now, when you renamed SA, did you run into any problems like when you were trying to upgrade or patch stuff or do anything like that?
No.
'Cause I think some of the upgrade processes rely on the SA account.
Yeah, there were bugs in the version upgrade deal, and I can't remember if it hit service packs too, but I know in one of the version upgrades from like 2005 to 2008, like if you rename the SA account, all hell broke loose.
Yeah, we only did this on 2012 and up. Anything older, we left.
Yeah, this is one of those where, so our company doesn't do security work, so just a quick prefix there, but like I'm usually of the account that if having the SA, I'm usually of the opinion that if you have the SA account in place, named with SA, with a really strong password, and you're still hacked, man, you got bigger problems, like you suck at security. But so in terms of whether or not you rename it or not, I don't care, but I am a big fan of not using it. Set it to a throwaway password that. Go ahead.
I don't know that there's a downside besides potentially installation issues, but which we didn't encounter. But if you just rename it, it keeps the same SID, so it's still the same account.
Yeah.
But it prevents the hacking.
And with vendors will say, hey, I need sysadmin level permissions. We require the SA login I'm like, no, here, let me give you another username, and it'll have the same permissions. It just won't be SA.
Cool. Let's move on to always on availability groups.
No!
One of Brent's favorite topics of this morning. Let's see. Luis Campos asks, what is the best way to deal with SQL Server agent in an always-on availability group environment? Is it better to stop the agent on my secondary replica or use some query to check if this is the primary replica?
I can take this one. So we did it differently at two different jobs. So the first job, all of the replicas, all agents that were not let's say we were just in CheckDB on MSDB. We didn't have to put any special query on that. But anything that was using the database that could fail over, we just wrapped our queries into, if it's the primary replica, then go ahead and run this query. So every single replica had the exact same job. And then so they would still be running on all of the replicas every single day. They just wouldn't be doing any work. Now at the next job, what was done is they set up a whole new SQL Server instance that all of the jobs ran from, and it used SQL CMD jobs, and it pointed to the AG listener. So it knew where the primary replica was. But that required an additional license, SQL Server license. So there was that overhead. I did like that method better than having to. If you make a change in a job on one of the replicas, 2 jobs ago, you'd have to remember to do it on all of the replicas, and that could be a problem unless you're monitoring for differences between those jobs.
Mm-hmm. Follow-up question on let's continue on our track of AGs from Glenn Thompson. He says, can I change a file share quorum on the fly without destroying the cluster and the always-on AG in the cluster?
Yes. Just make sure you don't have an outage during it.
From personal experience?
No. Just, if you have an outage and your quorum isn't right, it could get worse.
Gotcha. Let's see. Joan Choi asks, is there any way to change the size of memory allocated to internal pool in Resource Governor so that it can allocate more memory to default pools such as user queries?
Keep going, read the rest because it's awesome.
Oh, is there more? Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't even see that part. SQL Server is currently only allocated maximum 97 gigabytes of memory to a large user query running on the server, which has more than 500 gigabytes of memory.
Dear Lord! Oh my God!
What are you up to?
So you want one query to use more than 97 gigs of memory? I'm going to throw a really oddball one at you. This is where I want SSIS involved. If I have something that really needs to juggle more than, say, 64 gigs of RAM, this is where SSIS is beautiful at doing large joins between objects, sorting, caching the results for when it needs it later. So if I need to change data, SSIS is wonderful at that kind of thing. Analysis services can be awesome for that as well. But the SQL Server engine isn't what you want to use if you want to use, say, more than 64 gigs or 100 gigs worth of memory in a single query. Because remember, you're going to have other queries come in at the same time, and you don't want to be able to not cache any user data at all to just run the whole server dry with workspace memory. So it's an awesome, interesting question. What I'd love to hear more about is shoot us an email at help@brentozar.com and tell us more about the scenario where you need more than 97 gigs of RAM for a single query, because I think we would all have a good time digging deeper into that. We will be laughing with you, not laughing at you. Yes.
What's the most resource-intensive query you've seen?
Oh, Eric, I bet you've seen some ugly ones.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you about them in a couple months.
Yeah, it's the people who do ginormous queries across lots of data and then want it all sorted. And then, of course, 5 minutes later, they're like, I forgot something in the where clause. Let me try that again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of stuff where, like, people will have, or try to, union or bring all query results from a bunch of different queries together that are already gigantic, and it's just a horrible, horrible mess.
Justin says the biggest query cost he's seen is over 500,000. We've seen them in the billions and trillions.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago, I was working with a client who was having trouble with stuff not going parallel, and it was really funny because the serial cost of the query they were running was like 316 billion, but the parallel cost of the query was like 359 billion. So that's why it didn't go parallel, because it cost more.
Oh dear God.
Query tuning.
All right, let's move on to licensing. Chris has a question. The company I work for is installing multiple instances of SQL Server on a single virtual machine. I understand that saves on OS licensing. Does that save on SQL Server licensing as well?
You can throw, with one license for SQL Server, you can install up to 49 or 50 instances. I can never remember what the number is, but of course that's, suicide. That's a crazy town kind of talk. But so can you save money on licensing? Yes. Do you save time on troubleshooting and management? No. It's of course much tougher as you start doing instant stacking.
Cool. Did you recently do a webinar, Brent, last month about SAN?
I did. Yes, I did. Yes. I think for Idera, I think.
Oh, gotcha. It looks like Paul Epp attended that, and he says that you didn't talk much about latency during that webinar. Is latency something I shouldn't worry about when talking to my SAN admin?
That's a great question. And the blog post you want to go look for, it's not by me, but it's by a guy named Jeff Atwood. If you search for Jeff Atwood, A-T-W-O-O-D, and search for the infinite space between words. The infinite space between words. It's a play on the movie Her with Spike Jonze. The whole concept behind it is if you're going to get stuff out of memory, it's pretty quick, but the instant you have to hit disk, you're screwed. Even fast disk isn't all that fast comparing to getting the data out of memory. Generally speaking, I don't worry about latency on a SAN unless my biggest wait type is page IO latch. If page IO latch is my biggest wait type, then the way I'm going to fix it is usually by index tuning, query tuning, and adding memory. Trying to fix a slow SAN's latency blows. It's really expensive, it's slow, it's hard to do.
Let's see. Do we have a strong opinion on linked servers?
Oh, do we ever? We probably have 5, 6 different strong opinions about linked servers. Richie leans.
Right.
None of them involve synonyms.
Yeah.
Jamie says, linked servers are bad, and I get that, but right now they're deep-rooted in our environment, and they're working to remove it. But how would you troubleshoot a super slow insert being pushed from server B to server A, seeing that each row inserted is taking half a second, and the wait type is OLEDB?
OLEDB. Anybody want to tackle that? So here's the thing. Half a second actually isn't bad. Half a second for a linked server insert's actually okay. 500 milliseconds, because you're talking about the time that it takes to get locks across from one SQL server to another, to harden it to disk, and to echo back that the transaction committed successfully. It kind of blows for mirroring. Like database mirroring or always on availability much faster, but for a linked server, that's actually not terrible.
Per row?
Per row. Yeah. Well, here's the whole point. If you're going to do inserts, don't do them row by row. Get a batch. Get 1,000 records. Get 10,000 records. Ideally, write them all into TempDB over across that other linked server, and then issue your insert all at once into the table. Then 500 milliseconds is going to seem tiny relative to the number of row by row inserts you're doing.
Let's see. Richie, Tara, do you have any experience with SQL running in Azure?
Minimally.
We do have, let's see here, Reza has a SQL Server VM on Azure. Each database, only the primary file group is used. To boost performance and distribute data over several disks, we are planning to have more file groups. What are best practices for distributing objects between file groups?
Oh, this is where I need to have a sad trombone on my desk. Generally speaking, you're not going to get enough of a performance boost on Azure storage by breaking things up across file groups and files, because you need to make sure that whenever you fail over from one location to another, that all those file groups and files are in sync. Like if I'm going to use distributed storage, I forget what they call it in Azure, replicated storage. Because you can't really do that across disks, you can only do it one disk time. It won't guarantee integrity across multiple disks. It doesn't. All I'm going to end up doing is having a bunch of unreliable disks that won't fail over at the same point in time, and none of them are fast. I mean, none of them are very quick. Even with Amazon, I would give you the same approach. Even with on-premises SQL Server, I've never seen an instance where I go, oh, if you just broke these up into multiple file groups and files, your queries would be fast. Now, as long as you have to hit storage, you're going to be kind of screwed relative to the cost of getting it out of memory.
Let's see.
You did ask what the best practices were, so here's my deal with best practices with file groups. When I know that a database is going to be over a terabyte in size, I want to break them up by the ways that I would restore them. Because with restores with SQL Server, I have to restore the primary file group first. Then I can restore other file groups. So I want to put the stuff in the primary file group that has to come online quickly, and then things like archives or blobs I would put in other file groups, just so that I can restore those later. That concept's called online piecemeal restore. You can check that out in Books Online.
Cool. Let's move on to monitoring. Everybody always asks about our favorite monitoring tool.
Yay!
But that's not the question. That's not the question. This is from Scott. He says, over the last month and a half, we've been implementing Microsoft Utility Control Point to help monitor our instances. It's on 2012. We just found out that it has been purging job histories on the managed instances, leaving only the history of the jobs run in the last 24 hours. Are you aware of a way to increase that time frame? Incidentally, UCP is using an SA account to create and run its stored procedures and SQL agent jobs.
I don't have any experience with that product, but you know, if it can't be changed, just dump the data. Have a job that dumps the data into another table.
I don't think anyone in the universe has any experience using utility control point.
No.
I pooped about this when I was blogging about it. I'm like, this is garbage. No one should ever use this. It's possible that you've set up a UCP, but you're using management data warehouse to do the monitoring, because those two features were kind of sort of tied in together. There are ways that you can change management data warehouse. Search for that rather than the UCP. If you are using UCP, what I would guide you towards is getting away from that.
Okay, Eric, did you recently have a blog post regarding log?
I did. I had one today.
That was today. That's nice.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Just today.
James says, I currently have a database that is 400 gigabytes, and log size is about 33 gigabytes. Would you recommend changing it to 25% of the database size?
No. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. It'll grow. That's my
If it
advice.
needs to grow. Yeah.
Yeah, if it needs to grow. Otherwise, stop thinking about it. Put it out of your. You have better things to think about.
Was that
If it
that
loves
mentioned
you, it'll
as a
come back to
best
you.
practice? 25%?
What was it?
Was that 25% mentioned as a best practice?
It was something actually me and Brent and I cooked up in chat before when I was writing the post. It seemed like a nice round-ish number. 25% is a good size.
Oh, don't tell them all how the sausage is made.
That's exactly what happens in our chat.
Hooves
They rolled
and
a
tongues.
percentage die, and that's what came up.
There were other recommendations. So 25% was just, if on a new database maybe, or if you just don't know what to set it to, look at the blog post for the other recommendations, because those were, for a system that's been running for a while.
Don't just grow to 25%.
Let's see. There's a question from Sean. It's regarding weights. Let's see. On a Hyper-V cluster, what could be causing my TempDB files, 8 equal size, to have average weight stall MS of 3,800 milliseconds, and the next highest data file is 34 ms? SQL 2012.
3.8 seconds.
Oh.
All right, so we'll brainstorm. What could cause that? You could be writing your data to a potato.
Mm-hmm.
Could be your server could be under gunfire. You could be getting shot at.
It could be a Gutenberg press. You could just be, stamping out. It could be a dot matrix printer. It could be lots of things. You could have an 8-year-old in there just writing your data down.
3.8 seconds. Damn, that's bad. Yeah. So you said like the next highest is just 34. I'm not sure if you meant 34 milliseconds or 3,400 milliseconds.
Yeah.
Just
Milliseconds.
4 milliseconds. I would ask with your sysadmins, where's TempDB stored? Because with Hyper-V, just like with VMware, they can land different drive letters or different folders in different places, so you may have it on really crappy storage. Because often people hear TempDB and they go, oh, that could be crappy storage, and not realizing that it can be a huge bottleneck for your SQL Server. 3,800 milliseconds. Hold on a second. We'll example exactly what that is.
It's actually a co-load volume in Mozambique.
Whoa. Where is it coming from?
The voice of God.
He's behind you, Jessica.
It all makes sense now.
Doug is listening from above.
My sun-kissed bottle talking to me.
Why isn't Doug joining if he's free?
This is God, Kent. Because we've reached our webcam limit, that's why.
Really?
Turns out there's a 6 webcam limit. Yeah.
Oh, sucks to be the last one here.
Yeah. First come, first serve.
You know that. Are we going to change that?
I just Googled to find out if we could, and no, it's a hard-coded limit built in to go to webinar, so.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
That's
Yeah.
preposterous.
Yeah.
I guess it is pretty crappy to attend a panel, though, with like 18 panelists.
It's kind of comic relief, though, because you can see if people are all doing the same thing or if they're off paying
Roll
attention to
left and
something
right.
else. Yeah.
Next time I'll sit on Richie's lap so Doug can join.
It's a good thing, too, because Doug's not wearing a shirt today, so it's probably best if we don't.
How do you know I'm wearing anything?
Oh, man.
Doug is only wearing a swim cap today, so.
If you don't believe me, I'll make it snap. Hang on.
All right, back to schooling. Dennis asks, he says, running SP Blitz weekly and notice high VLFs. Noticed further into it, I looked further into it, and 1 terabyte database has just under 18,000 VLF count. Database has very heavy inserts and updates. How to lower?
Dennis, here's the thing. I recognize that you're a good person. You're a very nice person because you're running SP Blitz once a week. But next to every alert, there is a URL that goes to our website and gives you more information. Read that. I put a lot of work into that, and then when I thought it was good, I passed it on to people like Doug and Erik, who wrote a whole lot more stuff and made it even better. So it's really good. Go check that out. Fantastic info there, especially in the VLF page. That's really, I can't remember if it was Erik or Doug that fleshed that out. Erik or Darling.
We usually call Erik Darling.
Doug
so.
or Lane, I just can't remember.
Let's see, Michael Hall. Where should I start looking since I'm experiencing a high amount of preemptive OS get file attribute wait types when performing backups on a UNC file path for a cluster resource? It is super fast to the same location if I use the drive letter instead of the UNC file path.
I remember seeing this recently. I can't remember if somebody was doing restore with verify and was like scrolling through the files or what it was, but that network file speed access made all the difference. I think it was the on-site one I was just at, and was down at a client in Illinois and was running into this. And the way that we tested it, A/B tested it real fast, was we just did it to a local drive letter, and all those waits disappeared. And I'm like, all right, yo, dog, time to go fix the storage. And that's kind of just where I would stop as a SQL Server person.
Let's see. Question from Sharon. When do I stress test on my system? I get a lot of sessions with one wait type. There is one XE on the instance system that is built in. Is it a good thing to change the configuration? What would be the best to start changing?
I don't think you can change the configuration of the system health extended event session rather. If you're stress testing and that's the highest weight you see, you should probably just stress test harder. I don't think you might not be pushing too much in there.
Yeah, and so to follow up on that, so SQL query stress. If you search on our site for SQL query stress, we have a link on how to fake load tests, and it'll help you throw more load at the SQL Server, just in case that's the. Or if you want, answer or follow up an answer with what a lot of sessions with that wait type means. What does it mean, and like what's the total wait time on that?
Derek has a question that I've been wondering for some time now. It says, What is Tara hiding behind her screen? Is she working for the Japanese?
If you'd like to see, it's just there's not much here. I don't know. It's not very exciting. I mean, I just figured it was just easier, and it looked like I don't know. Better
So for those of you
Ouch.
who are on the podcast and you can't see the YouTube video, easier if you can watch us on YouTube, but for those of you who heard the podcast, Tara behind her has like a Japanese folding screen, and so she put it away, and she's working at Jurassic Park. There's a lot of going on there. You just don't usually show that. It'd be cool if you saw it on the YouTube, but that's okay. You can imagine.
I should actually do it like this because my complexion now looks better because I've been looking so pale in these webinars. I was worried about that's a family room sliding glass door, and I was worried about the light coming in. I don't know. Maybe I won't do it anymore. My complexion looks way better.
Now it's like fireside chats with Tara.
Right?
Yeah.
My complexion's still not good, by the way. I need to get some better lighting.
It's more like beachside chats with Tara, let's be honest. She's the only warm one.
San Diego.
Excuse me.
Oh,
I'm
my.
sorry, that's right.
Yeah.
Can you see the ocean out that window that you're keeping
Oh,
closed?
it's about a mile east for me.
Oh, wow. I'm about 15 miles, but yeah. I go once a year.
Yeah, we're the first one to evacuate in a hurricane. That's gone.
I might be closer to water than both of you.
Manhattan, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I can't afford the
Water's just
housing
like right
near the water.
Yeah.
somewhere.
Water.
One of these.
There we go. Now, the downside of the water out there, it's all frozen.
It will kill you.
My water has a Spain upside down. There we go.
Whoa!
My water is smirk.
Upside down, but it's smart.
Yeah.
What the hell is REM server on SQL 2000?
That's exactly how
You
the
don't
question
support
was
that.
asked, too.
And I'm like, what is that server? Is that a Twitter handle?
Never heard of that. First off, what the hell is SQL Server 2000? What is?
Yeah.
Never met that guy.
So, Jim, bad news. Not only is SQL Server out of support, 2000 is out of support, 2005 is coming up on out of support. So when you upgrade, just make sure that you're not going out to Antiques Roadshow and grabbing the next dusty version. So.
April 12th, it's out of commission.
Yeah.
No more 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Did you work on 2000, Brent, in your younger days?
I did. I just barely saw the bottom 7, but 7.0 was a version before 2000. I didn't really cut my teeth on 2000. Tara's been working on it even longer. Tara, what's your sordid history there?
I started as a student worker with the database team, and that's just how I got into the IT world. And after I graduated from college, I was hired on, and we were running SQL Server 4.2.1 back then, mostly 6.5, but I did touch 4.2.1, 6.5 and 7.0, and then when 2000 came out, it just changed the world. It was just so much better, and it wasn't even that great. When you look back on it, yeah.
Yeah,
Been
I was
around
really
6.5.
I was 6.5 to 7. Even 7 was a better upgrade, and then 2000. You're right. Things went.
Yeah.
So much better.
2000s where it really became more of an enterprise product. Although 2005, I think it was the truly more of an enterprise product.
Finally better than Access.
This is the big reason that we hired both Richie and Tara, is we were getting so many SQL Server 4.2 and 6.5 calls, and we just needed a team that would be able to handle that. So there we go.
Yeah, occasionally on SQL team there'll be a question for 6.5, and I'll notice that it goes unanswered. It's like, I'll click on it, see what it says. And they're talking about dump files, and just the terminology was different back then. It was DMP files, and the backup files weren't. Those were dump files, I believe, and your MDFs were DAT files.
Mm-hmm.
Check it out in Query Analyzer.
Yeah.
Cool. That's all the time we have for today.
Oh, no.
Thanks for hanging out for us with everybody, and we will see you guys next week. Adios, everybody.